Good morning, Cowboys Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Writer's Block podcast. I am your host, David Howman, joined by the one, the only, the icebreaker, Brandon Clements. Our other co-host, Chris Halling, is not here this week, but me and Brandon have plenty to talk about with the Cowboys having their second preseason game, winning the preseason game, scoring touchdowns. First touchdown we've seen of this preseason. And there were a couple of touchdowns that were pretty glorious to watch. And of course, for those who were not watching on Twitter, Brandon and I already got into it during the game, and there's still plenty of us for us to still get into in this episode. But before that, Brandon, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great, man. I know we had a little fun on Twitter. I never take those things seriously. So, kind of pull back the layers a little bit. Howman and I, it's all in good fun. We don't take it serious. So anyone that thinks we're having any beef, it's not. We like to bust each other's chops, and and to me, it's in good fun. I got a good laugh out of it during I'm not gonna lie to you, I was exhausted being on the East Coast, so I was starting to get tired, and I'm like, all right, I'll laugh out loud. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I was tired.
Man. Whoever decided on a 9 p.m. Central kickoff time, like I get they're on the West Coast, but that's still only 7 p.m. West Coast. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, I don't like it. Like, I complain about it when I watch NASCAR as a NASCAR fan, where it's like we always cater to the West Coast in a lot of ways. We're like, and then they don't get the race in. So it's like, for me, being on the East Coast, and it's like, oh, we're going to start the game at 10 o'clock. I'm like, what am I doing? Watching UFC? Like, this is what, like, UFC had a big pay-per-view at the same time. And I don't stay up for those anymore because I had kids and all that stuff. But I sucked it up. I probably got 5 hours, maybe 4.5 sleep going into Sunday morning because kids and all that. And I was very exhausted. I mean, I think I went to bed about 1:30 that morning, Sunday morning. So it was, what though? With everything that happened, which we're going to get into, it was all worth the sleep deprivation. I was in my glory. I'm not going to lie.
Was it though? Like, because I feel like, don't get me wrong. Like, it was a good game. There's a lot of things that we're going to talk about on this episode that I'm like a lot of very valuable stuff to watch. But like, was it exciting? Not really. The first half especially was a bore. I mean, the most exciting part was Brandon Aubrey drilling a 66-yard field goal with plenty of room to spare. And don't get me wrong, love Brandon Aubrey, but when your most exciting part of the first half of a football game is a field goal, like, it was boring. I was thinking in my head, I'm like, Mike McCarthy better be drawing up some like flea flickers and reverse passes in the second half, because we are all out here like just gutting it out to watch this game. Like, Cowboys Nation,
yeah.
I mean, we're all over the country, all over the world, but yeah. I would say probably primarily in the Central Time Zone. And it is rough, like, starting a game at 9 p.m. And that was a long game too. It took over 3 hours. And they were talking during the game about like how they had they're trying out the virtual measurement system for first downs instead of bringing out the chains. And they're like, it's more accurate, but also it speeds up the game. I'm like, it was still over 3 hours.
It definitely. I'll be honest with you. I mean, obviously the sample size is very small, but I missed the chain gang. But I don't mind this accuracy of the technology and everything. So, and I watched I was watching the CBS Dallas and CBS Dallas. I think it's CBS 11 in Dallas. I think it is. I was able to get that feed through different channels, so to speak, and because I wanted to hear the Dallas Cowboys folks, and they had some cool graphics and like the way they were explaining it. I personally liked it. I was talking to a former BTBer that because we're all part of the BTB alumni family. I was talking to somebody about the no index cards, so that was positive.
Yeah, I do think we've like, maybe this is just me. I'm over the index card reference. Like, I feel like even outside of Cowboys fandom, it comes up all the time. Like, anytime that there's a close call, it could be like Chiefs Jaguars, and like neither the broadcast crew from that game, and they're just like, oh, maybe they need an index card. I'm like, guys, this was This is a while ago. Get a new joke. Get new material.
Thank you, Gene Steratore, for doing that. I appreciate that. You know,
I appreciate it in the moment because it benefited my team.
Yes. But besides that, not so much. And Gene Steratore is he's I mean he refs everything, basketball, football, like he's been all over the place. So well respected official, I would say. I think he was one of the better ones. I know he's kind of more in the broadcast realm, but I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna make the easy joke is an oxymoron, well respected official, but
that's a valid point. That's a valid point to pin.
That's what Cowboys defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer would say for sure. He's had his fair share of entanglements with referees back in his days as the Vikings head coach, and of course in this game, a lot of things to talk about, but really. First one I want to touch on is just the defense once again playing well, and they didn't give up a touchdown, right? Or they did at the very end. They gave up a touchdown in the third quarter to the tight end who was lined up as a fullback on a goal line action play. But I mean, for the majority of this game, they were not giving up points. In fact, they scored points.
Yeah.
Keelan Hall had a real nice pick six off of Aiden O'Connell, who was competing for the starting job with the Raiders. And the day after the game, Antonio Pierce, the Raiders head coach, who we all know I'm the biggest fan of.
Of course.
Very sarcastically said for those who may be new to the show. But he came out the next day and was like, yeah, we've decided Gardner Minshew's our starter because – I mean, the defense, not like Minshew looked great in that game either, but they made Aiden O'Connell look real bad in that game. Brandon, I know last week we were both kind of like, yeah, the defense looked good, and Chris was the one who was saying, all those interceptions got thrown to him. But are you like, how much more confident are you in this defense after two straight preseason games where they've looked good and we haven't even seen their best players?
Yeah, I think it shows the depth of the team. I think the sad part about it is, I mentioned that word depth. We're going to cut some guys, by the end of this, before week one, when we get to final cut downs, there's going to be guys like, it's like that every year, but there's so many guys, not only just like the corners, there's linebackers, there's edge rushers, defensive tackles. There's so many players on this defense. I wish I could keep a good portion of them because there's only so many spots and there's so much talent. I love the safeties. I think your guy out of East Carolina, I know he showed up. He's been showing up. I know we joked about Julius that before. Wood. He's playing well. I mean, obviously, the normal suspects, Marquise Bell and Wanye Thomas, have shown what their worth is. And I mean, you're seeing the new defensive tackle we have, Jordan Phillips. We got to see him. He just shows up, and then he got to play this past weekend. So
yeah, he looks exactly like what we thought we were getting.
Yeah, I like him. I think I've watched his game. I mean, being somebody who's lives in Central New York, we have a lot of Bills fans, and I do remember watching a lot of Bills games because of that. And Jordan Phillips I believe one season had like 9 sacks, if I'm not mistaken. Like he was a formidable pass rusher. Still is pretty good. We obviously got another edge rusher that we just got, former New York Jet. Like that's going to be a lot of fun. Like and we'll see what happens with because he's had some injuries and whatnot. But there's so many guys that I want to keep on this team that just aren't. And Keelan Hall. I'm butchering that. I apologize to Hall, Mr. Hall, but he's played well. Like he's put on a great performance to be in that conversation. There's other guys that I mentioned last week that could make the team. This cornerback room, I think we can say, let's just get to the brass tacks. Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs, duh. I think they're good. Jordan Lewis, yeah, I think he's probably good.
He's another duh.
Yeah, that's another duh. I mean, Carson is about as of a lock that I can think of that's not those three. I think he's the 4. And then it gets interesting after that. I mean, there's guys that, I didn't even expect. Like, they weren't even on my radar. And these guys, and you got Booth.
I would say Booth is another lock because, I mean, you don't trade away. I mean, granted, they traded away a guy that was probably getting cut, but like, you don't trade away something for a player this close to the start of the season and then have him go out and lead the team in tackles, which is what he did in this game. He led the team in tackles. He had, I'm pretty sure, I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I think he had 8 tackles in this game.
He did.
That's how many he had all of last season with the Vikings.
Crazy.
Like he matched his last year's production tackle-wise in one game.
And here's the thing, dude. Like, you have guys also like Josh Butler, who I mentioned last week. Yeah. He played well. Like, I think Josh Butler's a pretty good player. I mean, I'm looking down the list.
Better than he did last week.
Yeah. Here's the thing, too. Like, and maybe I'm in the minority on it, but like, I'm thinking Eric Scott's going to be a practice squad guy this year. I think Carson's come in and I think he's taken that number 4 corner. And I think Booth that you just mentioned, you're right. Why would you bring it? Why would you make that trade if you're like, oh, I want to get this guy on the team? I think he's your 5. Do they keep a 6?
It's kind of like the Trey Lance trade last year. Granted, very different position, very different circumstances, but like they traded for Trey Lance and they didn't get to see him play at all. But he's going to make the roster.
Yeah, 100%. You assume he's going to make the roster.
Last year you assumed Lance is going to make the roster.
Oh, this year we're going to get down to that. But I mean but I guess the point is like this cornerback room like is really good. There's some guys. Yeah. There's guys that are 7, 8, 9 that I wish we could squeeze on the roster. We're just not going to have the room. Like I really like Josh Butler. I'm a big fan of his. And then Kamon Hall, like the interception. Aside from that, like he was pretty sticky in coverage, and like I felt like he was a pretty good tackler as well. And I think he checks those boxes. But it's a numbers game. We can't keep them all, so it's going to be interesting to see which and how many. Are they keeping 5? Are they keeping 6? Because if they're going to keep, I don't know if they keep 6 to be honest. I feel like they keep 5 because I feel like they're definitely keeping 4 safeties. I mean, the linebackers, I feel like there's a couple there that I feel like are going to make the team. And the defensive line, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think they're going to go heavy in one area on defense versus another? Like, what are your general thoughts?
So I think I'm glad you brought that up because one, it's going to be very interesting to see just because we haven't seen how Mike Zimmer likes to kind of divide those things up. We kind of got a sense for how Dan Quinn prefers to have things.
Yeah.
And just looking at the personnel, when you look at the defensive line, there's also some interesting developments there. Chauncey Golston the last 2 years has primarily been playing on the inside. Now they're primarily playing him on the outside.
Yeah.
Viliami Fihoko last year as a rookie, even though he didn't play, they were training him to be an inside guy. He had been an outside guy in college, and now they're kind of in a weird spot because like Osa's their 3 technique, right? Who's their backup 3 technique?
I mean,
based on last year's roster, it would be Chauncey Golston, like because he was listed as a defensive tackle, but he's not playing 3 tech anymore. Maybe it's Fihoko, but like he hasn't really been all that impressive. And I say that as like the number 1 Viliami Fihoko stan, but he hasn't really shown much anywhere he's lined up in the preseason. Like we know Mozzie Smith is going to play at the nose tackle. We know Jordan Phillips is going to play at nose tackle. That's, and then they've got Justin Rogers, who's a nose. Like they've got 3 different nose tackle options. Who's their backup 3 technique? Like maybe you can move DeMarcus Lawrence inside. They've done that in the past, and it's worked well on certain pass rushing packages. You can always move Chauncey Golston there in a pinch. I think it's going to be really interesting how they sort out this defensive line room just in terms of the depth behind Osa at that 3 technique position.
I was looking at different depth charts, and one that I'm looking at right now actually has Jordan Phillips behind Osa for that spot, which I know is kind of weird. And
that's the thing too, is in this game, granted, It could just be because they don't have the depth for the 3 technique spot. But Jordan Phillips played a lot of 3 technique in this game.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, he's for sure, like when Mozzie gets tired and he has to come out, Jordan Phillips is the one they're sending out there.
Yeah.
But it may be potentially that they're like playing him at 3 technique too to see, oh, he could be depth for both of those guys. And then that's one more roster spot you can kind of play with because you know he can spell Mozzie, he can spell Osa. And then, you know, if they're able to keep Justin Rogers on, if, you know, God forbid anything happens to Osa or he's gone for more than a couple of plays, Phillips can be your 3 technique, and then Rogers can spell Mozzie.
Do you think they keep 4 in the interior?
Probably, I think so. Because
I think so too.
I mean, with Zimmer's defense, like it's like with Dan Quinn, like yes, technically they had a 1 technique here and there. Like you had your Quentin Bohanna, you had who was the other guy, the big dude.
Oh, you mentioned Bohanna. I mean, obviously,
I mean, Neville Gallimore was kind of a bigger body.
Yeah,
but that's not who I'm thinking of. But like they would always have their kind of like designated 1 or 2 like big boys, and then their 3 technique. But it was
Hank. I mean, Hank was there too. But
what's that?
Hankins.
There we go. Yes,
yeah,
Hankins.
Hankins. Yeah,
man, I'm mad at myself for missing that one. But like with Dan Quinn, it was like if you were going to be an interior defensive player, you were either Hankins or you were a pass rusher. And with Zimmer, like they're 2 very clearly defined roles. He's not against having guys that can do both, but like he wants to have options at both. So I would be surprised if they have less than 4 interior guys. Now that being said, they could potentially be looking at Chauncey Golston as someone who can switch between playing on the outside, playing on the inside, and that could affect the numbers. Or more likely, more possibly, this is an area where they're going to add somebody from another team during preseason cuts to get some extra depth at the defensive tackle spot. But on the same topic of the defensive line, one thing that and also in line with the 3 technique conversation, one thing we all kind of talked about last week with this defense, as good as they looked, there wasn't much pass rush. There was more pass rush this game. They looked better against the Raiders. And that's also notable because the Raiders kept their starting offensive lineman minus Colton Miller, their left tackle who was injured. They kept them in for like into the 4th quarter. Some of them played into the 4th quarter, which that on its own, you know, speaks to the big brain on Coach Antonio Pierce, because how can you expose your starters like that to that much of a preseason game?
You know what? I think it's a lack of confidence in what he's got, and he wants to get those guys more reps. That's what I think.
Even then, like if you've got, even if you had like Terrence Steele playing, I mean, and the Cowboys haven't even given him any preseason reps, but like,
no, they won't.
If you were like, oh, we're going to give him some reps because we need him to just get a little bit of work, and then you played him into the 4th quarter, like
it's a little, it's concerning. It's concerning. I mean, here's the thing too.
Either way, played against starters for this team, week 1 starters for this team. The pass rush was much better.
Marshawn Nealon looked great.
Last week, the Cowboys as a team had 7 total pressures. Only 1 guy had multiple pressures. This week, as a team, they had 14 pressures. They doubled their production. 3 different players had multiple. Marshawn Nealon, like you said, he had 2. Al-Quadin Muhammad had 3. He was the only player last week who had multiple pressures. And guy we've already talked about, Keemon Hall, the corner, he had 2 pressures, which is also going to be a big factor in whether or not he's able to make the roster, because we know we've already seen it. Mike Zimmer likes to send his DBs on blitzes, and if Keemon Hall's going in there and having 2 pressures and a pick 6 and some pass breakups and making some tackles, that's a Mike Zimmer guy right there.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that coming into the preseason games, you didn't think he was going to have a shot to make the team. I think after the last 2 weeks, I think he's considered a guy that's on the bubble right now. Not because, you know, he's losing his spot. It's because he's pretty close to taking somebody else's right now. That's how well he's been playing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I remember last week I was like, this Keemon Hall guy He's looking pretty good. He's turning a few heads.
Yeah.
This game, I tweeted this out. He had a really nice pass breakup, and I tweeted out. This was before the pick six. I tweeted, "This is now 2 weeks in a row. Keemon Hall's caught my eye." Thinking in my head, like, this guy could sneak on the roster. Then he gets that pick six, and I was like, oh, there's no sneaking now. Everybody knows who this guy is.
Okay, so let me ask you this: Is he your cornerback 5?
I would say that obviously the top 3: Diggs, Bland, Lewis. I think Kalen Carson, like we said, he's a lock. I think Booth is a lock. So that's Booth would essentially be my 5. I think they find a way to keep 6 though. I think if they keep 6, I think Keemon Hall is number 6.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think you're right on that. I think you're right on the money. I feel like he would also be good in special teams too. I feel like he would be one of those guys that we could use him on special teams, because when you're in the back end of the depth chart at a position, if you can't earn your weight, if you can't earn it on special teams, you're not making the team. So I think that's an area where I think he could do his thing. I think the thing I worry about though is if they're gonna go 6 deep at corner, where are they going to be deficient then? Where are they going to go light?
I honestly, I think it could be linebacker, and not like light as in last year's light. Last year was light at linebacker. But I think like people heard Mike Zimmer say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna play with, like we're gonna have bigger bodies at linebacker. We're gonna play with more 3 linebacker formations." Like I absolutely believe that, but they're still not gonna run a 4-3 line like formation on a majority of their snaps. This is still nickel is still your base in today's NFL, and the Cowboys are gonna primarily have 2 linebackers on the field most of the time. So I think because Dan Quinn would go super light at the linebacker position. And until last year, I think it worked out fairly well. And last year was really only because you had a literal safety playing linebacker. Yeah. But I mean, I look at this linebacker group too, and it's like, Damone Clark's making the roster, DeMarvion Overshown's making the roster, Eric Kendricks, Maris Liufau. Like those guys are locks. I don't think that's up for debate. That's 4.
Yeah.
Like who else in this linebacker room? Not that any of them have played bad, but like who of those linebackers are you like, oh man, like it's really going to come down between these 2 guys? Like Willie Harvey has had some flashes, but he's also been out of position on some runs. Nick Vigil and Damian Wilson are like the savvy veterans, but they're not like flashing.
Yeah.
Buddy Johnson, Jason Johnson, Brock Mogensen, like those are all guys that are going on the practice squad.
I mean, I think you're right with the 4. If they're going to go 6 at that corner, I could see them rolling with the 4, because those 4 guys, I mean, obviously are locks. And
I think they could even get away with going 5.
Who would be your 5th?
I mean, at that point, it's kind of a crapshoot. I think. Like, I think the guys after that, it's like any of those guys, it kind of just depends on what specifically you're looking for. But Willie Harvey has the athleticism and the energy. Like he can be certainly helpful on special teams.
I think here's the thing though. I think Damian Wilson has a lot of value on special teams. He
does too, and he's got the veteran aspect to him. But really, at that point, it's just a question of realistically, what does Bones Fossil want?
Valid, especially with the new kickoff and everything. So,
another thing that's going to determine whether or not they can keep 6 corners.
What's that?
If they decide to go with only 2 quarterbacks. because we got our second game. We got our second game of Trey Lance in a Cowboys uniform. And I'll say this, he played a lot better than he did last week.
Yes, he did.
I'll say this too, he did not impress me that much.
I know.
Call Shania Twain.
I know you. Yeah, that don't impress me much. I get you, and that's
I knew the elder statesman would get that reference.
Oh, I grew up on it, man. Shania. That's
I love Shania.
Yeah, I used to have the old CDs back in the day. You know what I'm saying? So, I didn't get to see her here in Syracuse. Tickets were a little too much, but if the prices were right, I probably would have gone and see her, because I've been a big fan of hers. I've actually seen the documentary that was on Netflix a little while back. So like I'm actually a fan. You know, she was back in the 90s, and you know, even nowadays, respect what she's done in the business. But with Trey Lance, I know that was part of our little bit of Trey Lance, Ryan Flournoy. You know, by the way, I have to ask you, why are people still getting Ryan Flournoy's last name all messed up? I don't know. I don't get that. It's annoying the heck out of me.
Yeah, no, it bothered me all game.
Yeah, I'm sitting there like, it's not Flournoy. Like, what are we like? Like, I'm like, it's Flournoy. Like, you guys ever seen the movie? What was it? It was the Texas Western. That's how I know his name, last name, because
the Texas Western.
Yeah, it was UTEP. It was before UTEP. It was that basketball movie.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about. I can't.
Glory Road.
My wife would not be happy about me.
Glory Road.
Yeah, But
no,
when
you said Texas Western, I thought you meant like it was a movie, like it was a Western movie set in Texas. I was like, that does not narrow it down in the slightest.
No. I mean, obviously they went by Texas Western and all that. And that's how I know the last name well, because like, you know, watching that movie a ton as a kid, like I just remember, you know, Harry Flournoy. And I'm like, yeah. And as soon as like I heard of Ryan Flournoy, I was like, and here's the thing. Maybe we'll have to ask our good friend Jess, because I know Jess, you know, great guest on our show last week. She's had those conversations. Am I butchering his name, or is that right? Because I haven't heard anybody tell me one way or the other. So,
yeah, I look, until someone tells me that I'm wrong, I will assume with complete and total confidence that I am right.
That's valid. That's valid.
It's never failed me in life. But I mean, Ryan Flournoy, to his credit, because I was kind of dogging him last week. He had a great game. What a comeback game for him. And, I mean, that touchdown he got, catching the first touchdown at Cowboys preseason, and he was going up against Jack Jones, an Arizona State guy. You know, there's ain't nobody have it better than Arizona State. But Ryan Flournoy cooked that man off the line. He got that release. I mean, there's screenshots out there of when Ryan Flournoy like gets into the fade route and like starts drifting up, and Jack Jones is like, he's in a 3-point stance. Like he's not standing up straight.
And that's their cornerback one.
Yeah, that's their best DB.
And and here's the thing, y'all know me. Ryan Flournoy has been my guy. I mean, ever since the draft, he's been my guy. So watching him do that, it's almost like it's like a proud moment for me as a fan of his, because I'm like, I've seen it, and he's actually starting to do it against really good players. Because Jack's a good player, man. Like that guy's been well traveled. Obviously, he played with the Pats, but obviously he played at Arizona State back in the day, a few years back. But he's an accomplished cornerback. Like he's a player that's been in this league for a little bit. And Ryan Flournoy made him look like a guy that's an undrafted free agent, like rookie, like just like got him out of his shoes. And, Flournoy, and I told you guys last week, that dude does not drop passes. He had one bad drop in week 1. That dude was not dropping passes in week 2. He looked like a different player. And that was the type of performance he needed. And that's what I needed as a Ryan Flournoy supporter, to have him make this roster. I still think he's on the bubble. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but I wasn't going to do the layup with him on my list and all that stuff, so I'm going to get that out of the way right now. Flournoy is my guy, but I do think that if they carry 6 receivers, he's that 6th receiver right now.
Yeah, for the record, I have him as the 6th receiver on my not very much set in stone predictions right now. A week ago, I didn't.
It's fluid.
It changes so much, but I mean, again, doing it against Jack Jones, like that alone is impressive, because this is a good guy. Like we said, Bill Belichick drafted him, and he played well in New England. He really only left New England because he had some off-field issues. He played at Arizona State. He was phenomenal at Arizona State. Not just saying that as a Sun Devil fan. Like he was very, very good. He was coached by Herm Edwards, himself a Hall of Fame defensive back. His DB's coach when he started at Arizona State. Brandon, you'll appreciate this. Tony White, now the defensive coordinator, a Broyles nominee, a defensive coordinator in Nebraska, who came to Nebraska from Syracuse, who went to Syracuse from Arizona State. Widely regarded as one of the top defensive minds of college football right now. I mean, this is a guy that he's been coached by some of the very best, and he's playing like it. So for Ryan Flournoy to beat him the way that he did is impressive. Also impressive is the fact that he was able to snag some passes that were wildly overthrown.
Oh,
because Trey Lance still has his same problem. And like I said, Trey Lance played better in this game. In the second half especially, he played better. And he settled into a groove in the second half. Brandon, you and I were going back and forth in the second quarter, I believe, before he really settled into his groove. But it was, I mean, he still has he gets these throws where he puts too much on it, and there's not accuracy there. Those
are coachable. That's coachable though.
What's the QB school guy?
There's a few of them. I mean, Aaron Rodgers' brother does it.
No, JT.
I know. I can't think of his name either. But there's so many different quarterback gurus out there. Aaron Rodgers' brother,
JT O'Sullivan.
Okay. Yep. That's another one.
That's the guy. Yeah. JT O'Sullivan. He has a whole YouTube account. Great stuff if you haven't checked it out. Called the QB School. And he did a breakdown of Trey Lance's film last week. And of course, JT O'Sullivan, longtime NFL journeyman backup. He played his first, I think, 3 years in the NFL in New Orleans when Mike McCarthy was the offensive coordinator. He talked about this many times in the past, has videos up about it, about just X's and O's of a Mike McCarthy offense. He knows this playbook inside and out. And so anytime he does anything about Cowboys quarterbacks, I really listen. And with Trey Lance, he was kind of breaking down his footwork. And with Trey Lance, his footwork, there's just, it's inconsistent. There's a lot of wasted motion. And when you see some of these passes that get overthrown, it's just he gets his feet set, but he's doing so much moving right before that his body is just kind of a little out of control. And you definitely see that in some of the placement of these throws. And of course, there's no denying that he has the physical talent when he goes deep, which I'd like to see him do that a bit more in the next preseason game because
I agree.
He's been a little timid. But I mean, he has the arm strength. We know he has the speed and athleticism. He's a great athlete, but it's honing his footwork and his throwing mechanics. And it reminds me honestly a lot of Dak going into that 2019 season when he had John Kitna as his quarterbacks coach, really got his footwork more consistent. And Trey Lance is kind of where Dak was right before then, minus all the wins, all the actual production, the Rookie of the Year award, all that. But it's just man, it's tough because in his situation, he's going into the final year of his rookie deal, and he's still having these issues. And he's been in Dallas for a full offseason now. He's been with Dak Prescott. He's gone to the Dak yard a few times, and it's what isn't really connecting here? That's my question is why hasn't he cleaned up his footwork yet? If he's been in the league for 4 years now, been in Dallas in particular for a full off season now, been with Dak, been with Mike McCarthy, what needs to happen for him to take that next step in honing his craft?
He just needs more repetition. I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, if you go back to his college days at North Dakota State, they were not a heavy passing offense. They ran the ball a lot. I mean, look at look at the stats. I mean, I think in college, he threw maybe 300 attempts. It was something and that was in the duration of his career. He didn't throw a lot in that. And to me, he was more of the athletic quarterback where he could occasionally throw the pass. And when he did, against lesser competition, he got away with some of the throws that he won't get away with in the pros, obviously. And I think for him, at the end of the day, I think he just needs. I mean, Scott Tolzien, I think, is working. I think he's working well with him. I think he's made great strides. He's also that entire year he was, he wasn't. I mean, he was still mentally getting over what happened with the Niners. that, like, people don't realize, like, that's a mental issue. Like that, like his confidence had to have been, and I mean, I'm not in his head, obviously. I don't talk to Trey Lance as much as I'd like to. I'd like to pick his brain on a few things and have him on the show and all that. But I was
going to say, if you have been talking to him, like, you're holding out on us here.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, if I could get Trey Lance on, that'd be great. But I mean, like, from every video that I've seen, because I've been following his career for a long time, and it's a confidence thing for him. And I feel like, and Jess said it last week, like, he's starting to get more confident, and you're seeing that. And I feel like the more game reps he's gotten, you said it in the beginning part of that segment with Trey Lance. Week 1 to week 2 was a different player, and my projection is week 2 to week 3 in the preseason, it's going to be another step in the right direction. And I think he takes more steps to show why the Cowboys look smart. Yeah, I'm saying that, look smart by, trading a 4th round pick for a guy who is the same age as a lot of this draft class that's in here. Like, he's younger than Bo Nix, who's probably going to be the Broncos starter, even though your other favorite coach, Sean Payton, hasn't announced it yet. But Trey Lance is still young too. And he's young. He still has inexperience factor. And I think for him, week 3 is going to be important for him as well. And I'll just say this, and then I know you're going to roll your eyes at me with this one because I'm a Trey Lance guy. I wouldn't be surprised. I would love to see some teams show some interest in Cooper Rush, just so we can get this train moving with Trey Lance as the backup. Nothing against Cooper Rush. I appreciate what he's done. But to me, like, given we don't know what's going to happen with the Dak Prescott situation, I mean, that's one other domino we still have to wait to see. But if I'm choosing Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, given what we know right now, to me, you're setting the franchise back if you're choosing Cooper Rush. In my opinion, Cooper Rush to me he's a quality player as a backup, but he's got a lot of limitations.
And but that's what he's competing to be. A backup.
I get that, but God forbid Dak Prescott's contract doesn't go as planned, which we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. If he goes into the regular season without a contract, we might not have him next year. I'm just saying it right now.
Yeah, and but if that happens, it doesn't matter if it's Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. Like,
I think it does.
Even if Trey Lance is your guy, if he's your starter week 1, 2025. Like, even if Trey Lance ends up being the guy, like, his first year as the starter in Dallas is not going to go great.
I don't necessarily think that because
my God.
No. Here's the thing. And I'm going to argue this back at you. Trey Lance, you give him the weapons that Dak is going to have. You're not going to see. You're going to, like, even throws that are off just by a touch. CeeDee Lamb's going to make it look like it's effortless. Brandon Cooks isn't
guaranteed to be there either.
I get that.
You got to sign CeeDee Lamb. And do we think that CeeDee Lamb is going to take a deal if he doesn't know who's throwing him passes next year? If the only quarterback that's been thrown in passes, at least when things go according to plan, if he's not going to be there, do we think CeeDee isn't going to say, no, thanks, I'm just going to hit the open market and where I'm going to get paid way more than I will with Stephen Lowball and Jones?
Stephen Lowball and Jones. Valid point there. Here's the thing. Justin Jefferson, knowing the quarterback situation, took his money. Why wouldn't CeeDee Lamb take his money?
Because Minnesota gave him the money.
Dak, here's the thing. Regardless of Dak,
they made him the highest paid receiver.
And here's the thing. All the reports out there, which obviously nothing's done yet with CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys, they're getting to that Justin Jefferson per year number. So if they're paying him that kind of money, he's taking that deal, regardless if Dak Prescott is guaranteed back in 2025. If he's getting $33-34 million per year, he's going to, if those reports out there are actually true, and they're just working out the finer details, like different clauses and things like that, if he's happy at 33-34, I don't really think, yes, does he want Dak there? Of course he does. But I don't think he says, yeah, I'm not going to stay in Dallas for $33-34 million because, I don't know if Dak's going to be here next year. I think if the deal's right, he stays. Justin Jefferson got his money, but guess what? Who's his quarterback? They just lost J.J. McCarthy for the season. And I jokingly say this, hey, maybe Cooper Rush is throwing passes for him. And
maybe Trey Lance.
And here's the thing. That's the interesting part because a lot of Vikings fans want Trey Lance, which is, and it's because it's a hometown, like a home state. He's a Minnesota guy. The whole
and
thing.
There was a rumor connecting them back at the combine or whatever.
Yeah, I think Rich Eisen put it out there.
Yeah.
I think it was. And here's the thing. Trey Lance, to me, he's only 24, and he's still younger than some of these quarterbacks that are just coming into the league. And we got him for a 4th round pick. I'm okay with it. I'm completely fine with it. The biggest domino has to be Dak. Like, if Dak gets locked in, then we're not, like we talked about last week. Then it doesn't matter, like, if Trey or Cooper is backup, because if you're paying Dak Prescott as much as what it's being reported out there, which is $50 to $60 million, somewhere in that range, obviously he's the starting quarterback for however long that contract is. So the other point, it doesn't really matter. But we have to have these conversations because the Cowboys are dragging their feet like they always do with these deals. That's why in the past, DeMarcus Lawrence was a franchise tag player. Obviously, Dak doesn't, in his clause in his contract, they're not going to be able to franchise tag him. But the point is, the Cowboys are always doing this, and it frustrates the heck out of me. And here's the thing. One of these times we're going to get burned, and we're going to be like, wow, we just lost CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me because Jerry Jones and the Jones family I feel like they're lowballing these guys. Pay your best players, lock them up for the next 4 or 5 years. It's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, preaching to the choir, which is all the Cowboys nation.
Absolutely.
I think either way, though, like, unless the Cowboys get a really nice offer for Trey Lance, like, they're keeping all 3 of these quarterbacks, which also means it's going to be tough numbers-wise to keep somebody else somewhere. There's going to, like we already said, there's going to be some cuts. There's a lot of good depth on this team, and there's going to be some cuts that are tough to stomach, like Isaiah Land. You loved Isaiah Land. I loved Isaiah Land. It hurt.
Yeah.
There's always at least one of those that hurts. And so with that, the 2 of us have prepared a list of players, guys that we think are a roster lock. Obviously, we're not picking, I'm not going to be like, oh, Dak Prescott's a roster lock. Like, players that were not a lock entering training camp and now have played to the point where they are. Guys that are bubble players, one way or the other. Like, either they have played themselves to the bubble with poor performances or with great performances. And then endangered players. And I'm saying endangered because that's the polite way, but essentially, like, these guys are not making the roster unless something big changes. So we'll start with endangered. Get the negative out of the way first. But Brandon, who's your endangered player?
I mean, my endangered player is Deuce Vaughn. I mean, he's squarely on that bubble. And here's the thing. Last week, I thought he was cut. To be frank, I didn't see enough. Obviously, he didn't play because of he just didn't play last week because he was dealing with a hammy, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, he wasn't playing, and other guys were doing different things. Deuce Vaughn turned it on this past weekend. He flashed. He showed what I saw as someone who watches a lot of Big 12 football. What I saw him do at Kansas State, even though he's a diminutive size player in the NFL, the guy scores a lot of points and got a lot of yards in college. So to me, I never doubted that he could do this, but it's a numbers game. And for me personally, I think it comes down to Deuce Vaughn or Royce Freeman at this point. That's where I'm at. I think Royce Freeman has shown enough to be considered, but I think of it this way. Royce Freeman isn't a commodity. No offense to Royce. Like, it was like nobody was knocking down doors to get Royce Freeman on the roster. But you better believe if you cut Deuce Vaughn, someone's going to be intrigued because of what he did in Kansas State and take him, pick him up and take a chance at it, take a chance prior to week 1 and stash him on the roster. So just for the mere fact that I think you could keep Deuce, sneak a guy like Royce onto the practice squad and keep him there. And if it doesn't work out with Royce, Snoop Connor's another kind of player that has that similar skill set as a Royce Freeman, who I don't think makes the team. but I could see one or both of those guys on the practice squad just in case we need them. But Deuce Vaughn, I mean, the Cowboys could go a different way with Deuce Vaughn and say, yeah, we like the power back of Royce Freeman better. Maybe it's just maybe he's looked better in practice. Would the coaches feel that he's done better? Maybe he's the guy. I think it's pretty easy to think, though. In my opinion, you got Rico, you got Zeke. Those two are locks. I think Hunter Lepke's a lock. I feel like Hunter Lepke brings a lot of versatility, and I think that's a good thing because the Cowboys could technically just go 3 deep at tight end, but Hunter Lepke could be that 4th tight end because he's shown it. He's done it. We've seen it in games. We've seen it in practice. Like, he can do it. So for me, I think they carry 4 guys, and I think 3 of those guys are, like I mentioned, Rico, Zeke, and I think the majestic beast, Hunter Lepke. And then we just have to figure out that 4th one. And that's the thing. I like Snoop Connor too. I like the way he plays. Even on I think he was a no gain or a -1 play. He broke like 6 tackles. It felt like maybe a million at that point. I like Snoop Connor when he played in the SEC. So I watched him in the college for a few years. He's a good football player. So
got a great name too. That helps.
It does. Yes. I mean, Snoop is good, man. And I just, you can't keep them all. So for me, I think out of the bottom 3 that I mentioned, Deuce Vaughn, and we have Snoop Connor, and then we have Royce Freeman. I think Freeman and Connor, you could probably cut and have a good shot at getting back on the practice squad. Deuce is not making it back to us, in my opinion. So that's why he's on the bubble, because you don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. If it were me, Deuce is on the team. I think he brings a different element, a different explosiveness that the other backs don't bring. And I think it opens up the playbook a little bit because you could use him in different ways, but you could also use him on the inside. He doesn't mind getting hit. He's a smaller guy, but he's built. Like, he's not tall in stature, but every inch of that dude, he's cut. Like, he's a very big 5'5" player. So Deuce Vaughn, he's on my bubble. I think he makes the team, but I don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. That's why he's on my bubble.
And you know who you didn't even mention when talking about running backs? Malik Davis.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. My bad, Malik. Sorry.
And I don't think, like, inappropriately, like, he hasn't been as good as all the other guys you just talked about. Yeah. And like a year ago, people were saying, oh yeah, Malik Davis, like, he should probably make this roster. Like, he's in serious contention. People were saying, honestly, Malik Davis, like, he's shown enough. He should be a guy that we think about being a role player next year.
Yep.
And then we spent a whole offseason talking about how the running back room is garbage. Can't believe they didn't draft a running back. And now Royce Freeman looking good. Deuce Vaughn looking good. Talking about Snoop Connor. Rico's such a lock that he's not even playing. Hunter Lepke isn't playing. Like, they've got, Princeton Fant and Brevin Spann-Ford, 2 tight ends, lining up at fullback when they go into those sets. Like, we know he's making the roster, to your point.
Facts.
If they were seriously considering cutting Lepke, like, he would be out there in the preseason.
I agree.
And because he's a darn good fullback, he can play tight end, like you said. He can be a lead back. He did that in college too. The versatility alone, it's nonsensical not to have him. I'm going to jump around because it makes sense with Deuce, because you've listed him as your endangered player. I listed him as my roster lock. I think this game locked him up. Because I mean, they've been working with Deuce in this offseason and trying him out in the slot a little bit, kind of showing some flexibility with how they can use him. It's very clear that Mike McCarthy wants him to be a part of this offense, and they're just trying to figure out where. And of course, he didn't play in the first preseason game because he was dealing with a little bit of small nagging hamstring injury. He came in this game, and he looked good. He looked real good. He led the team with 34 rushing yards, technically tied Trey Lance with 34 rushing yards, but he had 2 fewer attempts, averaged 6.8 yards per carry. And like the way that he did that too was pretty impressive. There was that one where he gets hit in the backfield, spins out of it, goes around, puts his head down and powers a couple of guys, picks up a few extra yards. There were some where he went between the tackles and just like bulldozed his way forward, like showed some power. He looked noticeably better in blitz pickup than he did last year, which, by the way, he's probably not, if he makes the roster and he's part of this offense, like they're not going to use him in blitz protection hardly ever.
No.
Because if you're going to have a running back on this roster in that responsibility, it's going to be Zeke, one of the best pass blocking running backs of the last 5 years, or Hunter Lipke. So that doesn't even need to be a role for him, but he showed improvement there. I think he's just more confident. He's got a better sense about where to be in this offense, how to move around. And you're seeing it in the way that he played in that game. Plus, he also gives you some additional juice in the kick return game with the changes in the kickoff return game. We saw just one kick return for him in this one, and it really didn't go anywhere because he was returning it deep out of the end zone. That's just kind of what you're going to see with this new rule. But between what he showed, between the versatility that he has because of his size, like you were saying, he's probably not making it to the practice squad. I think he just locked up his spot as the fourth running back. And I think Royce Freeman is the only thing that complicates that, because the Cowboys have talked highly about him too, and I don't see a world in which they keep 5 running backs.
Yeah, they don't.
But like between Royce Freeman and Deuce Vaughn, all due respect to Royce Freeman, because I've talked him up on here before too. Like, I mean, Deuce is the choice. I mean, he's younger, he's got more roster control, he's got more upside. I don't see how you can take Royce over Deuce at this point.
Agree.
And Royce is probably at this point could be a practice squatter too.
Yeah. He's. I mean, like we talked about. Like, I think Deuce doesn't fall to the cracks of practice squad like Royce will. I think.
Right.
And for me, I think if I'm the Cowboys front office, obviously I'm in lockstep with you. I put him as my bubble, just not for me personally, but the way the Cowboys have thought about Royce and the competition in this running back room, because if they could throw a wrench in things and throw somebody in there, like, they could say, we really like Snoop Conner, we're going to keep him. We don't know what's going to happen at this point. I mean, we got another week of football coming up for the preseason, week 3. So we don't know. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I think Deuce is definitely the guy that just doesn't make it through to the practice squad. Somebody's picking him up. Royce and Snoop, I think we'll get them back on the practice squad. If not both, we're going to get one back. And the perfect scenario for me is Royce Freeman and Snoop Conner are both bigger, stronger power backs. So if you don't get one and get the other, it's not that big of a deal for me, because you're still getting one of those power backs onto the practice squad. So I think it's a win there.
So wait, so was Deuce your bubble player?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you listed him as your endangered player, guy who's like gonna get cut.
Oh no. He's my
who's your endangered player? That makes more sense.
Yeah.
But who is your endangered player?
Josh Ball.
Oh. Why? Because okay, I have my thoughts, but you go first.
I think it's a numbers game. I don't think he's one of the best. I think they're going to keep 8, because if I'm not mistaken, you'll correct me on this, because I believe the Cowboys, if they carry 8 offensive linemen, the whole third quarterback emergency rule, I believe that. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. Like, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm going off what I remember. And I think the Cowboys could do that and still carry 8 offensive linemen and still keep, Cooper Rush and Trey Lance behind Dak. So for me, I think Josh Ball is the odd man out. I think Josh Ball has played better, but I'm looking at the roster here. I mean, obviously Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Brock Hoffman, Zach Martin, Terrence Steele. And that's not my starting 5. I think Cooper Beebe is going to be the starter at center. So there's 6 right there. I'm keeping TJ
for the record on the center spot too. Of course, Cooper Beebe started this game Brock Hoffman came in, Cooper Beebe came back in the third quarter.
Yes.
On Monday in practice, they were splitting first-team reps, with Beebe getting the majority of those reps. So it seems like it's trending Beebe's way at this point.
Yeah, and so let's see. I got Guyton, Tyler Smith, Brock Hoffman, Zach Martin, Terrence Steele. That's 5. Cooper Beebe 6. TJ Bass. TJ Bass has not done anything wrong. You don't hear about offensive linemen. That's a good thing. That means he's doing his job. I think he still makes the roster at 7. And then for me, and it kind of leads to it'll make sense more in a little bit. But Awesome Richards, to me, his versatility, playing guard and tackle, he's done a hell of a job in the preseason. He's looked good in practice. The coaching staff has been raving about his flexibility, his flexibility positionally, and just how well he's played. Like watching him and Cooper Beebe on those double teams, him and Tyler Guyton on those double teams. Like you've seen the footage, just like I watched we watched the same game. I can't keep Richards. Richards is like he's in my top 8, and Josh Ball is like just there for me. But I think Josh Ball is the odd guy out. And I think, I forgot one guy's name, but he's injured. He's going to be out for at least 4 to 6 weeks. Chuma Edoga.
Oh, Chuma Edoga.
Chuma Edoga is. But I think what's going to happen there is, I feel like he's going to, they're going to leave that. They're going to put him on he's out 4 to 6 weeks. So there's a possibility where they could do like a short-term IR type of situation and see what they can get, from the other guys. Because I do think that's my 8. Josh Ball, it's just a numbers game. We can't keep them all, but he would be like my 9 or 10. Him and Waletzko are kind of back and forth for me. I think the Waletzko experiment has kind of, I don't know, I feel like it hasn't gone very well. Josh Ball, I think he's played admirably, but I think other guys on the roster have done enough to supplant his spot on the roster. That's why I feel like he's a guy that's going to get cut, and it's sheer numbers. We're not going to keep more than 8, I don't think.
See, in my like I said before, very much not set in stone 53. I have him going with 9. I have the top 6 that we all know, right?
Yeah.
The starters at both tackle and guard spot, and then Hoffman and Beebe. Awesome Richards. I have TJ Bass, of course. So that's 8. And then I have actually Josh Ball as the 9th, which is why I
don't think they carry 9.
Get here with you. And I have as my endangered player, similarly, and you mentioned him too, as Matt Waletzko. I don't think Matt Waletzko has a spot on this roster right now. And Matt Waletzko, he's not been good in preseason. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. He's through 2 games. He is second on the team in pressures allowed with 5. Only one with more is Earl Bostic Jr., who only played in the 1 game and played at left tackle after Chuma went down, and very clearly was not comfortable there. Then afterwards, we find out he was injured. It seems like he's I believe they waived him with the injury designation. So he's not really part of the plans going forward.
Yeah.
But Waletzko, I mean, he's going into his 3rd year, and he's been working primarily at right tackle the last 2 years. He should not look this bad. Josh Ball, on the other hand, you mentioned versatility with Awesome Richards. Josh Ball has shown versatility. They've primarily been working him at guard the last couple of years. First preseason game, he comes in and plays right guard. Didn't get a whole lot of passing reps, but he was looking darn good in the run game. He was moving some guys. He was playing with tenacity. Second game, he comes in, he plays left tackle. He didn't play guard at all. He only played left tackle in this game against the Raiders, and he didn't give up a single pressure. In fact, he was the highest graded Cowboys lineman in that game per PFF, which there's always the caveat with PFF player grades, and especially in the preseason because it's the preseason. But, I mean, highest graded player, that's not for nothing. Not giving up a pressure, that's not for nothing. And so he has experience playing right tackle. He has experience playing left tackle. He's gotten better. He got better last year. He's been better this year. He's played at guard. He's played at tackle, I think, especially with Chuma, because Chuma last year we saw was for a little bit, he was their backup left guard, and of course, he was their swing tackle. I think with Chuma out, maybe they see Josh Ball and Austin Richards as a kind of like a 2-for-1 replacement of what Chuma was and could be. And I think similar to what we were talking about with Keemon Hall, if they keep 6 corners, I think Keemon Hall's the guy. If they keep 9 deep offensive linemen, which they have generally done under Mike McCarthy, I think Josh Ball is at 9th. And I think, well, let's go at this point. It's like, hey, we told you to specialize in right tackle, and it's been 2 years, and it seems like you're going down in performance. So that's the guy that I feel like he's got to do something between now and the last preseason game to really save himself at this point.
Here's the other thing too. I think, and I don't think he's that high of a commodity, Matt Waletzko, where he doesn't make it back to the practice squad. Because I think the Cowboys would like to keep him on the practice squad, obviously. I think he would be a guy that they could stash there and keep working on him. I will say too, I mean, I get the 9 offensive lineman point, but I think 8 is going to be the magic number. I just, there's going to be guys on that. There's going to be like a Josh Ball. I think he has impressed. I will say that. Like there's, I wasn't the biggest Josh Ball fan the last couple of years. Obviously, we've talked about that on various podcasts and different streams and all that over the last couple of years. So I'm not the biggest Josh Ball guy, but I'll give the guy his due. I mean, he's played better. I think he's looked better. I just if we're gonna keep 8, I don't think he's in my. I can't put him in my top 8 at this point. I think he's done a good job, but I think they're going to have to go deeper at other positions and other areas to fulfill the roster to the best of their ability. And I just don't think you're keeping Josh Ball over maybe a particular cornerback or something that you really want to keep. I just don't see it that way. That's how I have to justify it. Like, okay, if we go a little bit lighter on offensive line, who am I keeping instead of Josh Ball on, say, defense on a cornerback? I would probably keep Hall at that point.
Yeah, and it's funny you tie that together because unbeknownst to you, pivoting to my bubble player, because we already heard your bubble player. My bubble player is Keemon Hall, who we already have talked about ad nauseum because he was phenomenal in that game. Or Kimonimal, is that a thing? Can we do that?
We can make it work. We can get that hashtag on.
Look, I just came up with that on the spot. So if it sucks, don't give me a hard time. And also let me know so I don't keep saying it. But Keemon Hall was great. He caught my eye in the first game, caught my eye on plenty more in the second game. He just, like I said, everything about him screams Mike Zimmer corner. He also
100%.
has played in the slot. He's played outside. That's another thing is having that flexibility. Because if you're thinking about guys that you want to keep for depth, Kalen Carson, they've pretty much exclusively worked on the outside.
Yeah.
So you want to have, obviously we know Jordan Lewis is the slot guy. Deron Bland has experience playing in the slot. But the fact that Keemon Hall has done both and has looked good doing both, I think helps him out. But like we've already said, you've got your top 3. Booth is probably a lock. Kalen Carson's probably a lock. Do you keep 6? How do you keep 6? Does that mean you have to go light at offensive line? Does that mean you have to go to light at linebacker? Like, how do the numbers work out? So that's why I think he's a bubble player that he's played himself up to that point because this guy joined the team like at the start of training camp. And he had a previous stint on the Cowboys practice squad, I think in 2020. So it's not like he's a complete unknown in Dallas, but he definitely was not part of the plan going into training camp. And then they were like, okay, we need a couple extra guys. Let's get Keemon Hall. So he's played himself into this spot. And I think with another really big final preseason performance, he could do what Wanye Thomas did last year, which is where the Cowboys had to go heavy at safety because Wanye Thomas was just too good. And they were like, okay, he's not coming back to us. We got to keep him. And they went heavy at safety. And I could see Keemon Hall doing something like that. But for right now, I think he's a little bit on the bubble.
No, I agree with you. I think that's a good bubble player. I think I mean, like you mentioned, we've talked about him, very highly in this episode, particularly, and he's, to me, that Wanye Thomas comparison, it makes a lot of sense because, Wanye kind of came out of nowhere and then the team had to keep him. I think Hall is like that as well. It also doesn't hurt that he came from the Niners, which have been like, I know he was on the Niners. I'm looking here. He was on their practice squad last year in 2023. And he was on the team up until the Cowboys just picked him up like a month ago. So that doesn't hurt if you bring in a guy that might know a thing or two about how about that Brock Purdy guy throws the ball. You know what I mean? So, obviously Brock Purdy didn't look too spectacular, albeit it was preseason. It is what it is.
Yeah, imagine that. He doesn't look good when he's throwing to a bunch of perennial All-Pros.
I mean, that's my point with Trey Lance, but neither here nor there. We won't go down that hole. But no,
so they're both overrated.
Well, we're not going to go down that Lance hole because we'll go there for a while. But, sticking with Hall, that has to add a little bit of value too, because the Niners have been kind of, they've been our kryptonite. Is that the right way? Kryptonite, the last few years.
Putting it lightly.
Yeah, that's true. But that is true. But having a guy like Hall who's within the system there for a little bit, he's going to know a thing or two. Plus, you're not just keeping him because of potential inside knowledge that he's going to have about what the coaches with the 49ers are, they might do. The guy's played well. He had a pick 6 for Pete's sake. Like he to me, I feel like they got to go heavy and keep this guy. I think he's well traveled. I know his experience is what it is, but I'm looking here. He's been on Chargers, Minnesota, New Orleans, Dallas, Chargers. He's been around San Fran. This dude's been around.
When he was in Minnesota, that's when Mike Zimmer was the head coach too. So he has that tie with Zimmer. Granted, he was on the practice squad in Minnesota, but
he was
know each other.
They're familiar with each other. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't bring somebody, from the to the practice squad if you didn't have some sort of interest and intrigue on the player. So, I mean, he's been in the league since 2019. I know his experience is what it is. He's been mostly a guy who hasn't made the game day roster, but I think he's a veteran in many aspects because as a practice squad player, he's worked with various talents over the years. We just mentioned a few of those teams. Last time I checked, the Chargers had some good receivers there at one point, like Keenan Allen, for example, just to throw a name out there. And then the Niners, all the weapons they had. So you're in practice and you're not playing on game day, but you're on the practice squad. You're rubbing elbows with these guys. So to me, has he had a lot of run on the main roster? No. The game day roster? No. But he's been in the league so long, I feel like he's one of those guys that just needed a little more seasoning. He needed a little more time. He is 27 now. So he's, I think it's time for Hall to make the team.
I agree. I mean, we both love Keemon Hall. Hopefully the Cowboys agree with us.
Yeah.
But Brandon, who is your roster lock? Let's end this on just the highest note. Guy that came in, maybe he was kind of a cut candidate, wasn't guaranteed he was making the roster. And you've seen enough already. 2 preseason games, few weeks of training camp that you're get this, nail in the name on the locker room because he's already made this roster. Who is it?
Awesome Richards. I alluded to it a little bit. I know we were talking the Josh Ball, Matt Will Let's Go talk. I didn't want to talk about it too much because I know we were going to get to this point. Awesome Richards, man. He's got so much flexibility. He can play tackle. He can play guard. I mean, and just like I mentioned earlier, just the way he blocks, I love the fact that he gets to that second level and lays it on a safety or a linebacker. He helps with the double team, bounces off, gets to the second level, and makes a great block on a safety linebacker and helps spring the running back for a decent gain. That's Pro Bowl talent. That's Pro Bowl potential, I should say there. That's Pro Bowl potential with Awesome Richards. Is he going to crack the starting lineup? No, I don't think he will at this point because I think there's a lot of depth. But he's too good of a player. He's got too much flexibility, and And flexibility on a roster is very important. We talked about that with Hunter Lepke, playing multiple positions. Austin Richards has shown that he can play anywhere on the offensive line practically. I don't know if he could do center. We haven't seen him do it, but he could definitely do guard or tackle. So for me, he's the perfect guy to have, on the bench. And God forbid something happens to one of your offensive linemen, you could call upon Austin Richards, bring him in, and I think he would do a heck of a job. To me, he's one of those guys that don't be surprised, if things go a different, particular way, he could be on that starting lineup in the next year or two. I mean, that's how talented that he is. And there are, I know some of the Cowboys content creators out there. There are a few that are on that Austin Richards bandwagon. They have been for a while, so I got to give kudos to those folks out there as well. Because I didn't really know a lot about him when he was drafted. But guess what? I watched the film. I did my research. I watched what he did in preseason so far, what I've heard in practice, what the coaches have said. To me, this dude's a lock. And again, if things go a particular way, he's not going to – I'll just say it this way. He's not going to be the starter on the left side anytime soon because the Tylers, they're going to have that lockdown for hopefully the next 10 years. That would be ideal. But there is a particular guard, Zach Martin, who we don't know what his future is long term. There's going to be a battle brewing when Zach Martin, decides that he wants to call it quits. I'm not putting that out in the universe, but those conversations, there have been those little bit of chatter. Obviously he's going to play this year, obviously, but thinking into the future, you have to think about your future. And a guy like Austin Richards would be a guy that I think would be a hell of a battle between him and like a TJ Bass for that guard position and years down the line. Obviously, I'm not hoping for a Hall of Famer to retire anytime soon because Zach Martin he's one of one. But you have to think of what's going to happen after Zach Martin. And a guy like Brandon, Austin Richards could do it.
Despite you just manifesting this dark timeline of a post-Zach Martin world,
I know.
I will say Austin Richards is aptly named because he is awesome. Seeing the way that he's grown and developed has been awesome. The versatility that he's had playing left tackle, playing left guard, they've worked him out up and down the line, and he's responded well. Earlier, I made reference to PFF grades for preseason games. Again, take it with however much salt you want. Highest graded Cowboys offensive lineman through these two preseason games. Austin Richards has a 74.4 grade, which is a good grade. Guys ahead of him is Tyler Guyton. I don't think anybody has any issue with that. He's been great. Josh Ball, who we talked about, granted he has played fewer snaps than Austin Richards, about the same amount as Guyton. They've both played well. And the guy with the highest grade is Cole Cabral, who only played the one game this week, being just picked up. Only played 16 snaps. Obviously there's a sample size thing there. There's also just the fact that he went to Arizona State as well. So
of course,
the natural bump that comes with, going to the greatest college in the entire country. But still, that's top 4 grade for Austin Richards.
Yeah.
On a line that features 2 guys in Cooper Beebe and Brock Hoffman competing for a starting job. One of them is going to be the starter. Tyler Guyton is a first-round pick. He's going to be the starter, and he's looked great. Being top 4, that's not bad. TJ Bass, who a year ago started 3 games and, wasn't always perfect, but he got better by the end of the year. That's positive for Austin Richards. I think he's a lock too. I don't know if I really thought that he was necessarily in danger going into or wasn't a lock entering training camp just because, it's year 2 and they knew he was a raw guy last year. But obviously he was not, in looking at the depth, I agree. He's played well enough to this point where not a single person is going to question when he makes the roster and be like, did he really earn it? Which,
he
Josh Ball or not, if Josh Ball makes it, if Matt Waletzko makes it, like I think Josh Ball deserves to make the roster, but he would be like one of those guys that you look at as like number 52, number 53. Awesome Richards is not in any danger at this point, I would say.
Safe. Yeah, he's safe.
So, but we're only a week out from really getting to find all that out and getting to, hear all of all the takes. There's always something that happens at preseason cut time. It does sound like there's whispers out there that suggest the Cowboys will probably be a little active with getting other players elsewhere. They've done that in the past. So there might be a couple of surprises. As always, we're going to be here at the Writer's Block to break it all down with you. I personally will not be here the next 2 weeks. Just as a side note, I'll be out of the country. Have to do a little thing getting married, but promise I will be back. I will be breaking down Cowboys football with my guys, Brandon Clements and Chris Holling, before too long. A totally changed man, but my heart will still belong to the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, Brandon and Chris are gonna keep you informed and up to date with everything in Cowboys land in the meantime. And knowing them, probably just talk about Trey Lance the entire time and how he's the future. But
or Jalen Brooks.
It'll be. I wanted to get a Jalen Brooks barb in there because he dropped that pass, and Chris, with Chris not here, I wasn't going to say anything because he's got to defend his guy.
That's his guy.
Yeah, and honestly, he. I mean, we all know Chris would have had him as his roster lock, and that would have been fair too. I think Jalen Brooks has done enough to earn his roster spot. Silence from Brandon.
I mean, you know how I feel about Ryan.
Yeah. Ford. Well, you can save it for next week.
Yeah.
But until then, signing off for Brandon, for David, the Writer's Block. Until next week, remember, go Cowboys.